Hey guys, Jackpot here, bringing you another video. In today's video, we are tier ranking Plunderstorm abilities. I will be going over each spell and placing them in a tier ranking. I do have a lot of experience. As you can see, our Plunder is at 2.15 million. I have played a lot of Plunder, and if you have played Plunder, you have probably ran into me. I am all over the Plunderstorm. I have over 300 victories, mostly solos, 95% solos. Duos and trios this season, the lobbies do not fill up, so it's mostly solos. So I just want to also say, in my tier ranking, abilities, I'm trying to rank them by themselves, just the spell. There are certain abilities that would be very much ranked higher, rather, used with other spells. And there's also always a counter to the spells you're running. So it could be a B or S, B, C, D spell, but like with certain accompanying spells or going against certain accompanying spells, it could alter. And this is just my opinion. I have ran a lot of Plunderstorm. The spells, just remember there are hard counters, so do not get angry with my ranking system. I'm trying to be as balanced and fair with the spells as possible. It's hard because there are hard counters to each move set. Just try to use my ranked system to get your wins. Thanks for watching. Alright guys, the first spell we are going to rank is Fire Whirl. Fire Whirl will be going into S tier. It is the strongest spell early game against NPCs or enemy players. You will mow down people. Originally when it came out, it was even stronger and it got nerfed, but it is still strong. So let's look at the stats. These abilities are if you have the epic version and are at level 10. So I'm just leaving it at that, and we're going to look at all abilities like that. So if you do a full Fire Whirl, granted it's pretty hard to get every hit with the Fire Whirl, you will be doing 137 damage. And at level 10, you have 200 points, so you're doing almost 3/4 their health with Fire Whirl. Arguably the most damage spell that Plunderstorm has, if you're able to connect with everything. But it just steamrolls. Granted, there are ways to get around it. Repel, Lightning Bulwark, but you can bully your way with Lightning Bulwark. Traps do slow it down. Someone cast Earthbreaker, Windstorm you, but you will hurt them in the process. So arguably the strongest offensive spell Plunderstorm has. So it's definitely got to go S tier. You can run it with anything. It's just so very strong, either for farming plunder or kill hunting. I don't think it will move from S tier anytime soon unless it gets nerfed again. Alright guys, the next spell we are going to rank is going to be Holy Shield. This is a tough one to rank for me because I personally use it a lot. But I would border on A to B, low end A, but I'm going to have an unbiased opinion and put it in B tier. If you're able to hit straight up, straight again, and recast the AoE ability, it does do a lot of damage. I feel it's a very good move late game. Early game with the early versions, not so much. If you had to fight early on, having Holy Shield will not help you. Having the epic version, mid to late game, will help you. but the cooldown is just way off. It's not a fun spell to have very early on. It does decent in mowing down NPCs for leveling at the beginning just by recasting the AoE ability. But I feel it gets better and better, more so than other spells with upgraded versions and later in the game when you get to the final circle. Let's look at the stats on it. So at level 10 fully, if you're able to hit them straight up and on the boomerang back, and with the AoE, you're able to do 61 damage fully. Most times, unless you catch them in a windstorm or if they're just standing there, you're probably only going to hit them with the AoE ability, which still, around 30 damage. But if you're able to, hit them with the front end with it, plus that, you're roughly looking at about a 45 to 50 damage, so about a fourth of their damage. So I find this one very strong late game, like I said, but early on, the cooldown on it isn't desirable. Here, I'll show you the common cooldown on it. Yeah, 14 seconds. It's very slow when you get it first off. So I feel very comfortable putting in B, but I could argue also for A. Next spell up is Aura of Zealotry. And this has gone for a merry-go-round for me. My first rendition would have put this at C. Now I think it's S to A. I feel comfortable putting it at A. I can argue for S tier. It is a very good ability, very strong offensively, very strong a little bit defensively because you have a little speed boost with inside to kind of get away and to kind of uh, retract enemies, repel them rather, that they don't want to get in there and get whomped. But let's look at the stats. Change it to the epic version. And you can see you can do up to 59 damage. Arguably more than this. This is like based off if you don't get all the hits. If someone stands in there the whole time, they're dead. Let's just see the following. It's got a 12-yard radius. You get 12% movement speed, 70% movement speed while inside of it, and increase your melee damage by 38%, and increases your range. And then the aura, if you notice, people are able to do the abilities for about almost 2 seconds, 1.5 to be exact, after leaving the consecration on the ground. So it is very strong. The only reason I don't really see it as S tier is unless you're like very at the end game, you can get out of it pretty easily. Like you could argue you could set it up with Earthbreaker, Windstorm, put in some damage. Yes, but I can argue that same for every spell. With a proper setup, you can utilize every spell that I would deem quite useless on its own. But this in particular is still very strong by itself without any setup. So I can see it being S tier. I can see it being A tier. I feel comfortable putting it in A tier. It is a very strong ability and very fun to use. So we will leave it in A tier. The next spell up is Celestial Barrage. And had I done this list a couple weeks ago, pre-nerf, it would have been S tier, S tier, S tier. No questions asked. It was the best spell in the game. If you utilized it, great. The range on it was impeccable. The cone damage, the width of the ability that it was able to hit targets was very wide, so it was very, very easy to uh, connect on your enemies. But that being said, I would still put it in B tier. It's still a very strong offensive ability. It does do a decent amount of damage, and it is pretty good for mowing down NPCs. But other than if you get a direct hit, uh, the enemies, very close to you, not moving or stuck in a windstorm or fighting another mob, it's a great third party spell. Don't get me wrong, but when you're like caught in a 1v1, you can easily miss with this ability, and it's just, since the nerf, kind of like, it's, you kind of have to hit all the time with it for it to be effective, but it does do very good at farming early on mobs for killing. Let's look at the ability. So at it's doing 52 damage. It can go up to 150 yards, so you could just yeet that out and zip it out and kill so many mobs. So it is very good for leveling. So by all means, pick it up. But I don't know if you want it late game. Um, Arguably, it does kind of get better at like the when the circle gets smaller, even though it's so long. It's just you kind of have to instant cast it like right in front of you. It's kind of like uh, I'd argue it's kind of like a castable Syrian axe with less than a cone range. Um, it does kind of you're kind of halted while you are casting it. Um, Unlike like Earthbreaker, you're not immune to CC while you're casting it. So when you're holding it down to use it, you are open to any CC or Firewall just coming right at you. But it is still a very strong ability. It's just since the nerf, it being able to hit your enemies became a lot harder. But I would still put it in B tier. The next ability is our first utility spell, Windstorm, and this is an easy S for me. You can set up so many spells and make them better than they are if you land a connect. Very good early game, late game, does some damage. Late game, you can, stun them, heal. You can use it defensively, offensively. Use it for a spell setup, whether that be like an Earthbreaker, Star Bomb setup. I know a lot of people love using that with traps. You can kind of put your enemy at bay if you keep landing your windstorms. Very, very strong in duos and trios. Mind you, this is more of a solo mindset tier list, but you can single out a person in trios. If you have a couple people on your team with Windstorm and you just keep stunning them, you can isolate one person on the team. It is just a very strong ability. I will try to get you the stats on it. It does do damage. It's not much, but it does at like level 10, the epic version, 24 damage. So you could technically get a killing blow with it. The only issue with it is if you miss. So you got to be spot on with your windstorms, but it's got an 8-second cooldown, strong throughout the whole way. Really doesn't help you much with killing NPCs. This is more of your PvP combat ability. If you're looking for utility spells to, help you farm levels, this isn't the ability for you. But you can use it defensively, get away from an enemy, or use it to use your setup. Easy S tier for me. Next up on our list, we have Syrian Axe. And this, I'm going to put A tier. It's a very strong offensive ability, I believe on an 8-second cooldown with the epic version at level 10. It's very good with setups. It hurts. Very strong on your enemies. Will put them in defense mode very fast if you connect. It's got a very fair offensive cone in order to hit your target. Let's look at the stats for this. So it does 59 damage once you hit it. Standard. It's doing over a fourth of your health to a level 10. You know, it's very strong early game, mid game, late game. So that's why it's getting A tier. I don't believe it's S tier, but I could see the argument where someone could put it in S tier, but I feel pretty confident putting it in A tier. Very good for leveling NPCs, killing NPCs. Very good in PvP combat, so we are going to leave it in A tier. The next ability on our list is going to be Fade to Shadow. Easiest S tier I can give, probably the best spell in the game. It is so good offensively, more or less defensively, to just evade, restart the fight, heal. It is just so useful. It's not going to help you level, it's not going to help you kill NPCs, but if you want to win games, I highly recommend you picking up Fade to Shadow. Look at the stats on it. The epic version at level 10, or you don't even need to be at level 10, it does no damage. It's 12 seconds. Your stealth for 4 seconds after the fact, and it blinks you forward 25 yards. It is so good at evading, and then if you want to get sneak up, cast an Earthbreaker or something, hit them with a toxic smack roll, come back out of the fight. It is so good. Very early game, mid game, and especially late game when you're just evading, trying to stay alive, let the others fight, stay out of the fight, get into the fight. It is hands down the best spell in the game. Okay, guys, the next spell on our list is Toxic Smackerel, which, Naomi, please, please, please stop snoring. Please stop snoring. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. You're so loud. You're so loud, baby cakes. Don't you do that. Alright, guys, the next spell on our list is Toxic Smackerel, which is a very hard one for me. Last season, if we can call it that, when it was first out, S tier all the way. I can argue it also being S tier again, but I'm going to put it in A tier. And I'm going to explain my reasoning. It got nerfed by 2 seconds. Now, if you have the epic version, about a second, but you used to be able just to spam it and always have a dot up, and it does more damage to an enemy player if they're already poisoned by it. So, like, the damage profile on it was insane, and you could just spam it. But they did nerf it coming into this go around, or this season rather. Look at the stats on it. So now it's a 5.5 second cooldown. It used to be like 4.5 seconds or 4 seconds in the previous season with just like the common version. It was pretty insane. But if you land these Toxic Smackerels, arguably S tier. And it goes well with so many combos up in your face. It puts panic on enemies if you keep landing these Toxic Smackerels. They never really get fully healed. It does damage, so if someone's using Fade to Shadow, it cancels that aura. You'll be able to see them. If you're able to stay on top of them and land Toxic Smackerel, arguably S tier. I'm just going to put it in A tier because of the nerf, but it wasn't by much. But it's a little slower, and that's what made it so potent, because as you can see, it does bonus damage, like 22.5. So if you miss one while you're fighting and you're just getting hurt, it does cut down. So I'm going to leave it at A tier. Next spell on our list is going to be Lightning Bulwark. Lightning Bulwark is easily S tier. It is a very good defensive ability. It gives you a speed boost if you get hit, and a little damage boost. It is very good early, mid, late game for PvP encounters. You can prolong a fight a lot with this spell, and if you're looking at it, it's the epic version has an 8-second cooldown. It does do damage. It does repel damage, so you could get a killing blow. You get 120% movement speed. The only downside with this is if you're playing against a player that knows you're having it in a prolonged fight, you can be sitting there like a sitting duck and kind of stuck. While if you're not hit, although it deters them from using an ability, it allows you to create separation. More or less, it can get steamrolled by Fire World at the same point, as it only repels one hit, so one tick. So if you create separation with it, but I guess the only downside I have when I'm using this ability is when you're getting in the very last circle and violet lightning hits, and you're casting it. Although it is good, if no one hits you in that last circle, you are kind of opening yourself up of just eating a violent lightning and dying. I have died multiple times with that. It happens, but that is one downside of using Lightning Bulwark. But other than that, it's just S tier. It's just a very good defensive ability. The next spell we have on the list is going to be Storm Archon. And I feel pretty confidently to put this in B tier. Borderline C tier. It's decent for leveling, killing mobs. Also decent in PvP encounters to a stretch. I get, early game, it does a decent amount of damage. Just the damage profile is weird. I can arguably say that as the circle gets tighter and tighter, it arguably gets better. So see, this one's weird that I believe in at the beginning of the game, it's like D tier, early mid C, mid B, mid late A, and then you could maybe argue it's S tier. So I feel confident that it's. I'll just say it as B tier. Let's look at the stats on it. So it's like a frontal cone. The first two hits will hit for 19.6, and then the last hit hits for 39.1. So it's like a 3-cast ability. It's on a 14-second cooldown with the epic version, so that's why I kind of argue it's like a slower ability. If you don't hit it, it's sort of easier to avoid, but like I said, when the circle gets closer, the encounters get smaller. It's easy to hit, easy to third party other players while they're fighting. So I feel pretty confident that it should be in B. Okay, guys, the next spell is going to be Earthbreaker, and this is a very tough one to rank. A lot of people use it. I personally not a fan of it for the most part, but I will give it B tier. The spell itself, I think, is either C or D, to be honest. But with the right spells associated with it, the setup, it can be very effective early to mid to late game. It is also decent for use on killing mobs early game, aggroing them all and killing them all at one time. So it is decent in that capability. It's just very codependent. It's a very codependent spell. By itself, not that strong, but when paired with other spells, it's decent. So let's look at the damage profile. It does 55 damage, so to a level 10 with 200 health, that's about a fourth. And it's got a fairly decent AoE. The one plus is you are immune to CC while channeling it, so technically you can use it as like a defensive spell if someone's casting a windstorm or what have you on you. It will stun your opponent, so again with follow-up spells, it's pretty effective. But if you don't have those follow-up spells, it's you could just easily lightning bolt or time it right out, fade a shadow out, just run out if you're not slowed. Um, it's or you could just as an opposing player just eat it sometimes and just use your like tactics macro, whatever damage profile you may have. So as a spell itself, that's why I'm just gonna leave it into B tier. It's it's only as strong as your setup, I believe. So we will leave it in B tier. The next spell on our list is Starbomb, and this goes not an S tier. This is D tier. It's a crap spell. It's only really decent if you pair it with Earthbreaker, or if you might be able to get a Snowdrift off for people to end. I see a lot of people use it, and when I see someone use it, I just instantly think free kill. While you're casting it, you can just get walloped on if someone runs outside. You could just melee them to death, even a level 10 using it. Um, I can't even argue that it's strong late game because you got a tiny circle, but you are going to be severely slowed. And if you get hit by violent lightning while casting it, like you need a perfect storm for this spell to work. And by itself, it does do damage. Let's take a look at it. It's fairly strong. See, it hits almost half your health if you can land it. It's just very hard to land. Granted, you can set them in panic mode, so a lot of people will run the Earthbreaker Starbound combo. In solos, it's not good. Duos and trios, I could maybe bump it to a C to a B. With all that chaos, you might get some big hits and stunned. With different spells going out, slowing abilities. I wouldn't touch this thing in solos, but in trios, I guess you can get away with it. It's fairly stronger because just the more CC abilities. And the upside with it is it does do decent to farm mobs early on. The only time I'll use this is if it's like one of the first spells that drop. I will um, gather mobs, use it, maybe level 5, and that thing is off. I will grab a totally different spell. I don't want it. It's rough, but it does hit hard. Just good luck landing it. The next spell up is going to be Quaking Leap, and this is going to go A tier. If you know how to use it, it is very, very strong. It's just the pressure, one of the pressure abilities. You can maintain constant pressure. You can also use it defensively to uh, Quaking Leap out and create separation if you need to heal. It's if you don't land it, it can be, I wouldn't call it S tier, but it's, I would say, mid to high A tier in like especially solos. When you're just constantly on someone and it can stun. It's effective early, mid to late game. It does do damage. Does do 33 damage and it will stun the players, so it allows for a lot of other setup. So, you know, Quaking Leap, Toxic Smack Roll, Slicing Winds. We've all seen it. and you can go up to 30 yards, but it also does do 33 damage. So it is a very strong high pressure ability to really just don't allow your opponent any space. Next spell up is Rhyme Arrow. People might hate me. They're like, man, this move doesn't hit hard. It's S tier. It is S tier. It is my favorite ability. It works in all modes of the game outside of maybe mob leveling. It's really doesn't hit hard. The very low form, it kind of sucks, but when you get that epic version mid to late game, you're able to just create separation, chase down kills with it, and just keep applying pressure. Just third party. You're just hitting people. It does do 26 damage, so you're looking about a 1/8. It's a very short cooldown, so you're just able to keep spamming it on players. Just create separation, keep spamming it. Don't let other players heal towards the end game. It's not slowing you down. When the vicious lightning hits at the end circle, you're just able to just keep going. I mean, the only weakness I would say is getting this as like an uncommon to even common early, like early game to mid game where it's not good, but late game when you have this as a epic version, it won't miss. You can't miss, so you don't have to worry about it. You just spam this thing off cooldown, and it just creates so much pressure. You're allowed to third party, and just it. I've had my best games using Rhyme Arrow, and I believe it deserves S tier. The next spell on our list is going to be Void tier. I've used this very minimally. Like, if it's there, I always try to have spells. It is creative. I won't necessarily put it in D tier. It's going in a solid C tier for me. It does do damage if you're able to cast it. It's kind of like the monk ability that allows you to just, or like the mage ability where you port back to your spot. So where I find this, I've seen it used to be pretty useful. If you're hitting chase, you pop it. You run, let chase, and pop it. You go the other way to create more separation. I have seen it used offensively. Um, it's to do a little bit of damage. Let's see the stat profile on it. It can do up to 39 special damage. So that's a decent damage profile. It's just on a 12-second cooldown. The only time I've really seen it used very well is if you're able to, like in the last circle, get on top like a building and set it up there, and then just like go for hit and runs, get creative that way. It's a kind of cheesy way to play, and you just keep using your port, so it is useful in that aspect. But there are definitely better utility spells to use, but it's not that bad. So I think C tier is the right tier for it. The next spell up is going to be Steel Traps. I'm not the biggest fan of using them, but I would probably say they're B tier. You can stop a lot of people in their tracks that are just pushing you to create some separation or have your own setup for your damage. Um, this will stop someone that's spamming Firewall pretty hard, and they will probably stop going after you for a little bit if you just keep spamming these. They do decent amount of damage, and they are very capable with different setups. I know a popular one is using the hunter's chain, popping the steel traps, then using your hunter chain to pull them into said trap, and then do your damage abilities. That's a very popular setup. So a B, I'm being very flexible. You can use them offensively and defensively, even though technically like they're a defensive spell. If you really look at them, let's look at their damage profile. So one hits, 29 damage. They summon a cone around you. It can really slow down people, allow you time to heal up. So they are very strong, stronger with certain combos, most definitely. But worth picking up if you have an open slot available. And it's not the greatest, but not the worst. So B tier, I feel I'm very comfortable putting that at B tier. The next spell up is Slicing Winds. Last season or last go around, it was the easy S tier. You were able to spam it like crazy. Matched with Toxic Smack Roll, it was arguably the highest combo in the game. I could argue A or B tier. Definitely a lot less people use it since they nerfed it by a couple seconds. It's good early, mid, late game. You can use it defensively, offensively. If you don't have any movement abilities, you can use it to get out of fight or engage in a fight and chase down. Pair it with another melee move, or range. It kind of pairs with anything. In all honesty, let's look at the damage profile on it. Now it's an 8-second cooldown. I believe it was like 6, 5.5. So you could really just keep spamming it, and you can go up to 36 yards. So it was, if you're fighting against someone, at least last Plunderstorm, it was hell. I'm not gonna lie, it was hell. If someone had the epic version of this, paired with Toxic Smack Roll, you got some high kill games. I think I had like a 19 kill game at one point with those. It it was really nutty, but it's still really good. But you'll notice not that many people still use it, but it is very, very strong still. And it just creates a lot of pressure. It's, I would say, probably better for solos rather than uh, duos and trios. Especially, this is a very good spell one-on-one, but third party around. But it does allow you to get back into the fight or get out of the fight if you don't have a barrel roll available or any like fade form or fade to get out of the fight. So I will keep it at an A tier. Okay, the next spell up is Explosive Caltrips. I don't know whether to put this in C or D. If it's C, it's very like a C minus. I'll leave it in C. It's fine, but if you notice while you're playing that you'll see tons of epic versions of these laying down, there's a reason why. It's just not really that great in engagements. I more or less, the only time you'll see me use them is if it's one of the first spells I pick up, and I use it for a movement ability or to kill mobs, actually, to gather them up and use it as a damage ability. It really, in a 1v1 combat, doesn't do that much, but let's look at the damage profile on it. So if you're hit by the traps, it's 24 damage. It's a backwards blink for 25 yards, and it leaves in a straight line from where you landed. So it's pretty easy to avoid if you're getting pursued. So it's not as much as a deterrent as steel traps. So that's why it's not even B tier. Hard for me not to put this at D tier. So I wouldn't recommend using these. If there's nothing else to pick up, by all means pick them up. It's just very, very mid to low mid. Not very great in early, mid to late games. You want any other spell, to be honest. The next spell is Repel. I'm going to put it in B tier. I could argue A. It's definitely better than a C tier. It's a pretty good defensive. I would say better early game than late game because you were just stuck standing still late game, so you are kind of opening yourself up to violent lightning while using it. But I can argue that it's very strong late game. If some really depending on what other spells people are using. By itself, I believe it's a B tier move. Let's look at the stats. It does do 26 damage if someone's standing on top of you. You do silence them. It's a 10-yard radius for their silence. While you're casting, you're immune to damage, immune to CC. It does knock them back, and like I said, it silences them. It is very nice because you can cast it during global cooldown. But the one thing is you're heavily slowed while channeling it. And if we compare it, you see the 12-second cooldown. Lightning Bulwark is 8 seconds. So you will be able to cast way more Lightning Bulwarks. And with the bonus thing of the added speed while casting Lightning Bulwark, I believe that's why Lightning Bulwark is a S and Repel is a B. And if people have like Fire Whirl, Syrian Axe, Toxic Mackerel damage profiles, it might work better. But like if they're using range spells, Repel, you're just opening yourself up to just get closed in on while casting it. Although it just really depends on other players what they're using for their damage profile. By all means, it's a good spell, but I would take Lightning Bulwark every day over it. So I feel like B tier is a pretty good tier to be put for Repel. Where do we put Manosphere? I'm going to put it in A. I can argue S or B. Manosphere's got a decent damage profile. It does knock back enemies. You can dodge it. It is it's good early to mid to late game. It's good for AoE leveling, killing mobs, leveling up. So I feel pretty confident in A. Very, very good late game. Let's look at the damage profile. It does almost a fourth of your damage if you're fighting against level 10. It is a hold down ability, so the orb just gets faster and faster. So if someone's on you and you keep holding it down, you can hit it multiple players with it, and it's pretty hard to dodge like later in the game. But like if they're at somewhat of a range, it does get kind of difficult to hit, and the range isn't that far. If someone times their abilities right, they can just be on you. It does knock back players on hit. I have killed multiple people at the edge of the circle, pushed them into the storm, and they just died to storm tick damage. So you can play easy to play against. Very like if you're not getting attacked, you can third party the heck out of people, hit two of them at the same time, knock them both in, and just cause havoc and clean up the scraps of the fight. But it is also easy to counter in my opinion, so I will leave it in A tier. The next spell up is going to be Snowdrift. I'm going to put high C, like low B here. It works good with certain combos. It's a fine ability. It slows them and it does do damage. I'd like to pick it up and just AoE mobs with it, to be honest. It's useful to have, but I always end up, not being successful at the end of a game if I have Snowdrift in my ability list. Let's look at the damage profile. It does, if you hit, I think it hits like 3 times during its cast. Yes, 3 times 12.6. So if you're doing almost a fourth of their damage with it, it does slow them down. So if you have a setup with like traps, Earthbreaker, Star Bomb, Syrian Axe, any melee, it can pair well with other spells, but by itself, I think it's just a C tier ability. So I feel comfortable putting it there. I can argue B tier because it does help set up so many damage spells. But if someone already has a melee, smack roll, Syrian Axe, aura of zealotry on you, it's not going to do much, and you're casting that and you're just getting whomped. So I'd rather have like a lightning bulwark or a windstorm to create separation. But early to mid to late game, I feel like it's the same thing. Slow down an enemy, use your damage profile. So it's a decent ability, but I feel comfortable still putting it in C. Hunter's Chains, we will put that in B tier. Like I said earlier in the list, it's very good with steel traps. You can use it to third party the heck out of someone, pull them in, or engage them because you can use it. You can press it twice to chains to your opponent, or if he runs out of the circle, or you run out of the radius, they will get pulled to you. So I feel like it's a very effective spell with good setup. It is pretty strong solo, but I would argue like in trios, it's maybe A to S tier. You have a couple people running chains, you can isolate someone so fast with Hunter's Chains, and it's very hard to create separation with someone rocking it. So if you like to create pressure, this is a spell for you. It does do damage. It does do 31 damage, so people are surprised that I'm just chains. It's fine. I'll wait it out, and they're dead. Somewhat, if you got a lightning bulwark and you time it right, or you fey form or fade to shadow out of it. So there are different ways to just minimize the hunter's chains. But if you catch someone waiting on their cooldowns to come back up on their spells, or they don't have those spells to counter it, it is very strong. 12-second cooldown, like I said, probably better in duos and trios, really good in trios than solos, but altogether a good ability. The next spell up is Fey Form, and I feel comfortable putting this at B tier. It is a very good mobility spell, like one of the only mobility spells you have. That, I mean, Quaking Leap and Fade to Shadow, but you do get 125% movement speed. It makes you immune to CC. You can get out of the enemy player's CC. You can create separation, move faster around the map. So I would argue it's very good early to mid late, not late when you're getting towards like the final circles. That's where I think it just doesn't hold up towards the other ones. But up until then, it's very, very good ability. Let's look at the stats on it. You got a 12-second cooldown. Like I said, it can get you out of all the CC, and you are immune to CC while you're in it. So if you need to create separation, or rather create pressure to catch up to someone, it is very useful that way. But just the late game, I would put it like A tier, but I just feel like it's not that useful at the end stages of the game. I rather have the other abilities we have ranked higher. Let's check that out. Yeah, I'd rather have Lightning Bulwark, Fade, and Windstorm. Even Quaking Leap at the end circle than Fade Form. So I'm going to leave Fade Form in B tier. Last up is Call Galfeather. I'm just going to put it in D. I could see it can create separation, but it's just, that's it. I mean, it can block you. It blocks a circle. I guess you can use it offensively and defensively. Let's look at the damage profile on it. It doesn't do any damage. It only has a 10-yard radius. It does knock you back. You can use it to like chase down, put it in front of someone, and knock them back into you. So it's, I would say, pretty good in early to mid game, maybe even mid to late, to like get someone off of you. But there's just so many other better abilities. I I haven't played with it much in trios. You know what? We're gonna do some. We'll put it in C tier. Um, I I've been cheese this way, so we'll just do C for cheese on this because I have been kept out of the final circle. Died to storm damage by this ability, and for that, I think deserves C tier. You can use it that way of keeping people out of the circle. Um, so I guess if you get creative with it, it can get really strong. It's just depending on their damage profile if they have no more movement abilities to get back into the circle. But other than that, it's C or D tier for me.